Hi, everyone. I'm Joan Robbins, and I'm going to tell you my story of moving through the years, the decades actually, from Whiteout to Chatgpt. You all remember Whiteout, I'm sure. You had to roll up the plantain and draw the brush across the text that you want to change, then blow on it and roll it back down and make those changes. Well, that was my first experience in my life, starting to actually write for publication. So I'm trying to take you through my journey from words to photography to technology. And all along, all I'm searching for is a way to communicate what I am very interested in whatever is the latest way to do it. So starting with my English literature I taught, I got up in front of the classroom. And then and I wrote a dissertation also. And then I bought some cameras when the digital world opened up. And later, I wanted to actually express what I was seeing in the natural world and have actual books to hold. So I started producing books with mainly pictures and finally books with narration. And then, as technology continued to progress, I moved to experiment with blogs and videos as well. So that's my story. I'm going to start here with my dissertation and my irritation with trying to type it myself when I couldn't do it. I had to hire someone and it was rather expensive. And that's my son. I took my time in getting my PhD. I had three kids and a busy schedule with them. But finally, when my son was 16, we marched over to UCLA Library and deposited that tome. But somehow, while I was teaching, I got wind of word processing. There was a newspaper article. This was in the early 80s when it was just beginning, and WordStar was the very first one. And I happened to live right near the company, and I found out that a friend of mine actually worked there. So I asked her to take me over. I was thinking, wow, wouldn't it have been nice to have that word processor to type my dissertation? I could have done it myself. But anyway, she took me over there and they offered me a job. They were really looking for someone to be an editor. And with my background, they thought I would make a good editor as a part-time job. Well, I joined the company and I found that I really have a knack for technology. I'm nerdy. And I loved the atmosphere. It was exciting. It was the early days of computers and it was like a family. And they actually paid me way better than the teaching paid. And I couldn't believe that I could have such a good time and do work and get paid for it. So because teaching was always a little bit hard for me. I'm kind of a introvert, I guess, and it took a lot out of me. All those classes to prepare and all those papers to correct and an audience. So when the digital photography came out, here I was in the computer world. I went out and bought one of the first ones, and I then later graduated to a long zoom because became very interested in nature. And finally, to my current camera, which is a big galoot, which keeps me healthy because I have to be able to carry it long distances. uh, okay, my first experience with bird photography, I remember the day, I remember the minute. I was in Phoenix Lake in Marin County, walking around, I was down at the shore taking a picture of just a plain old mallard, and someone whispered to me, "Turn around." And I turned, and there, right next to me, just about, was this great blue heron. I turned my camera and I took a picture. I took a picture of it, and I looked at the screen and I looked up at the bird, and then he flew off, and I was in love. It's the best way to describe it. I fell in love with bird photography in that moment, and I knew it. So to this day, this was taken this year at California Park. I'm still taking pictures of great blue herons, but now when I've learned, I like to tell a story in a picture, not just take a bird sitting on a branch or standing in the water. So this tells the story of three active, big, big babies attacking mom because they're hungry. And it's actually good that they do that because that encourages her to regurgitate and then she can feed them. And here's another great blue heron picture that I took on the Sacramento River from my kayak not too long ago. I think this was in August. And what fascinated me about this picture wasn't so much the bird, but also the habitat. I know it's an invasive species, but it looked beautiful to me that morning. The light was particularly beautiful. And so when I took it into my computer to edit, it looked flat because pictures, when you shoot raw, which I do, which means I don't put any settings until later, you have to edit your pictures. So I did increase the saturation a bit and tried to exaggerate some of the branches. And I think it shows the surreal and magical atmosphere of that morning. And that's another point. I try to when I when I edit a picture, I try to express in the editing somehow the feeling I had when I took the picture. So throughout this talk, I'll be talking about my efforts to communicate in the different media. So then the photography led me to meet a woman who loved to travel, and she had traveled so extensively for work. She worked at Wells Fargo that she had a lot of travel miles, so she was able to help me with the airplane fare, and we went every year to some exotic place together. The first was to Antarctica, where the light was so incredibly crystal clear that you almost couldn't take a bad picture. These are the emperor penguins. We spent 3 or 4 days, all day in their presence, and the problem was keeping them at a distance because they kept wanting to explore us. They kept coming toward us, especially the babies. And then we also went to Africa and to take pictures both of the exotic, beautiful birds and animals. And this picture I have over my couch in my living room is my favorite picture, probably of all time. The young lions, that's a group of siblings, I believe. They were frightened by someone standing up in a boat in a river where they were lying down. Excuse me. And they ran right in front of our truck. And so I was able to catch this picture, which I love. And then the Pantanal, which was another incredible place it's in Brazil. It's one road that leads through this country so rich in wildlife that it was almost overwhelming. There were otters and jaguars and woodpeckers and hyacinth macaws and capybara. The poor capybara were pretty much the prey to everything, especially the caiman, the, their version of, I guess, alligators. And I went to Churchill, Manitoba to see the polar bears, and there was kind of a sad story because even though it was a while back, climate change has already caused the ice to form much later and it's more fragile. And the bears wake up from their hibernation and they're very hungry and they need to find food and they have to wait till the ice forms and they would roam up and down the edge of the ice. It was kind of difficult to watch. But here at home, I also found wonderful subjects. In fact, we live in a wildlife mecca here. There's this was taken at the Sacramento Wildlife Refuge, We were taking pictures of, I believe it was pelicans way in the distance, and then suddenly we realized that just a few feet from the car, there were these gorgeous bluet damselflies. And this is another one of my favorite pictures. Oh, maybe I was mistaken. Maybe this is the favorite now, and the lions are second now. This was taken at Llano Seco, and in the if you walk out to the platform in the back, sometimes, if you're lucky, you can get out there without scaring them. You're in the dark, and you wait as the sun rises. Before it rises, there's a few minutes of this incredible pink light, especially when there are clouds in the sky, because the clouds get a pink color and they reflect it onto the water. And it was very dark, but I managed to get this picture, and they seemed to be posing just perfectly for me, each one in a different position. Uh, a lot of it is luck and patience. You have to be there, you have to wait, a lot of waiting. So, given all the travel, I was very much moved to have something in my hands to record that. Everybody wants to record their travel, so I'm not any different in that way. And so I made a series of travel books, which I used a company called My Publisher, which is out of business now, but I didn't make the book myself. I used their software and made it. And I also wanted a place to keep my pictures and share them. So although I also share on Facebook pretty consistently every few days, I also have a website. It's just joanrobbins.com. And there I have my favorite pictures, and you can buy them if you want. But here under recent, I hope you can see this. The my most recent pictures, obviously, um, say from just a few days ago. And there's also buried deep under in the menus. I hope no one finds it. Are all my pictures because I use it as a repository as well and a backup. And you can find my YouTube pictures. I mean, excuse me, my YouTube page, um, where I have through the years I've also recorded quite a few moments out in the wildlife that capture the behavior of the animals or the birds. And so you can find many of my videos there. And lastly, here's my blog. It'll guide you to my Substack blog. So that's on joanrobbins.com. The the rest of what I want to try to describe why I wanted to write actual books. They're small books. I call them my tiny book series, and yet they're quite they're wonderful for me in particular because I can relive my experiences. This experience happened in Montana. We happened to own a little mobile home on Flathead Lake for a while, and my neighbor called. This is before we got up there one summer, and said, "I have a baby osprey. The whole nest fell down. The baby survived, and I've got it in a dog kennel. What do I do?" So we called around, and the University of Montana said, "Put put the baby in the box on the somewhere where the parents can see it." And she had a dock with a roof, so she put it out there, and within a half a day, they had brought sticks and covered the area. They made a nest for her on the dock. And for the rest of the summer, when I finally got up there, I could watch her grow. It was a most amazing experience. I would set out early in the morning and go kayaking, and she'd be there to greet me. And when I got back, she'd greet me again. I think she knew who I was. And then one day, of course, I came back and she was gone. I immediately thought the worst. I thought she had drowned or someone had found her and eaten her. But there she was. Oh, by the way, she practiced her flying all the time, and this is another example. Oh, I'll back. So, just to finish up the osprey story, uh, she flew and she managed to get up into the nest that the parents had also built up in the tree. They had repaired the nest, and she managed to get there. So I went home happy for my summer vacation. And here's another experience about um, a very magical experience. I have a friend named Suji who loves to roam everywhere in the wild and find birds and animals that, especially bears, he likes bears and owls. And one day he called me, this is in Upper Park. He called me and he said, "You better get out here. I think I've found a mating pair of northern pygmy owls." Well, I ran right out there, and so did two other friends. So there were four of us standing under the tree watching the mating. And within a couple of days, Suji noticed that the female would go into this hole that was in the tree that we had been standing right under. And one day she went in and didn't come out, so he knew she had started sitting on her eggs. There was the hole was barely 2 inches, and it was sitting. It was in the tree, so we took turns sitting out there through the whole 2, 3 months. It was one would go every 4 days until finally we knew the babies were fine, and then there were two of us out there on this particular day. We wanted to catch the first fledgling, the first baby to leave the nest. And so we sat there hour after hour watching this little hole, and every now and then this little guy would stick his head out and look like he was going to fly and never make it, never get out. And finally, I mean, you had to pay such close attention because if you miss it, you miss it. That's it. So I was going to take video and he was going to take stills, and all of a sudden that little head came out way further and fluttered right toward me and actually landed on my head for a second and then on the ground. And Suji ran over and uh, interviewed me on the spot. And in order to see the video, um, I think you're going to have to press this button here. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but it might work. I'll test it out.
Now, Ms. Robbins, perhaps you could explain to the world how it is exactly to feel to be the first person in history to be hit in the head by a flying baby northern pygmy owl fresh from the nest.
I'm totally speechless. It was like I had been blessed by a bird. It flew, it just fluttered onto my head. It fluttered, and then it went back there and down to the ground. I just feel blessed. So we followed these little babies and the family. The parents continued to feed them once they were out of the nest. For each day, they would move a little bit north from the nest tree, and we would follow them. And then one day we couldn't find them, and they were gone. Suji and I searched for the next couple of days, and we never found them again. And sadly, during that winter, the following winter, the tree with the nest hole fell down, and so they weren't going to ever use it again. So we lucked out for one season. And of course, I had to write a book about it. And by this time, I had explored the book module in Lightroom. Lightroom is my editing tool for my photographs. So I could lay out the book and write the text and actually prepare it for the publisher. And it was quite fun to do. And then so I did actually make a few books, which uh, some of them are on Amazon, the series that I did about grebes and the owls and the baby osprey, and there are a few other books up there. You'd have to, on Amazon, you have to search under Joan Anne, Anne, Robbins, because there's apparently another Joan Robbins who writes books, children's books. But this is another um, collaboration, a music video that I wrote with a friend of mine about my Montana trip last summer. And I'm going to test this out. There's a fellow photographer who also writes music. He writes lyrics and music, and he got AI voices to sing the song, and it came out so beautifully. I've just got to show it to you.
She wakes before the sun has kissed the pines, camera in her hand, chasing that morning light. Mist rolls off the lake, quiet as a prayer. Joan paddles slowly, Mother Nature put her there. Montana morning, wild and free. Big sky country paints what only the heart can see. Wings on the wind, a nuthatch sings. Joan finds her soul in the smallest of things.
Well, I hope that played. So then I collaborated also with a friend of mine on on her poetry book. She she was a minister here in Chico. Her name is Judith Stone, and she writes poetry, especially about birds and about some of my pictures, actually. My Some of my pictures have inspired her, so that's also a book that I have for sale. And finally, here is my blog. I got the idea because there are so many people who are writing blogs these days, and I wanted to write one about my final decades. I hope it's an S on the end there, but it could be my final one. And I wanted to also talk about conserving birds and conserving our habitat, which is so rapidly diminishing. The number of birds has been reduced about 70% since the early 70s. So I decided to just write what I felt comfortable with about the birds and about some of my experiences out in the field. And I think, and I oh, and I named it Our Final Birds, and I loved that name. My friends thought it was too sad and too dark, but I kept it. And I asked ChatGPT to help me talk through why I wanted to call it that. And I had several reasons, and after a while, I got ChatGPT to summarize the reasons because I'm so worried about vulnerable species disappearing. Here, the spotted owl absolutely must have groves of redwoods, and they are diminishing. And the the least bittern is a tiny bird that I took this in Thermalito Afterbay, and their habitat is very fragile, and they're disappearing as well. And the ferruginous um, hawks, which used to be plentiful up on the Vina Plains, are now sadly, we don't even see them. I saw one last year. I used to see multiple ferruginous hawks. So I talked to ChatGPT about why I wanted to call it our final birds, and here's why. Because it's my final decade, because the focus is on birds, and it will embody my trips, my kayak outings, migrations, and personal reflections. And there's that double meaning. Final birds can suggest that these are our final birds on Earth, and leaving a record of what I see out there in the field. So I decided to keep the title. And I used ChatGPT to explore my ideas for the blog. And what it really serves as a place to write rough notes. And I say, do not respond. I just keep my notes there. And then I say, do you think I have a blog here? And it just tells me what I want to hear, of course. And then I say, do not write the first draft. I write the first draft. I do not like the writing style that ChatGPT uses. It's very bland and very uninteresting. I can, upload samples of my work from various types of writing I've done and ask it to use my style, and it does, but it's off. It's not me. So I write the drafts, and it checks my spelling and punctuation and typos, catches hopefully most of them. And also the psychology of having a place to sort of beat ideas around and maybe even do some research on the birds that I'm interested in at the time. Like find me some interesting information about pygmy owls. And it does. And sometimes I use the information. But it also helps me avoid writer's block. I get ideas, I have a place to write about it, I get a little feedback, and it keeps me going. It's and I've never done that before, and I truly enjoy writing, and it's hard to believe I can say that because writing used to be very sort of really hard, that blank sheet of paper. So that's it. That's my presentation. I just wanted to show you how I progress through time using different media and different tools to try to express myself and to show how vulnerable this earth is and how important it is to keep the balance and keep every species healthy if we can. As if we lose the insects, if we lose the bees, we lose everything. We lose humanity. So I wrote a little poem a couple of years ago, and it still expresses exactly how I feel. So I just read it to you. All I want to do, all I want to do is get out onto the creek and find me an otter or three, a wood duck and a mink, an osprey with a giant fish, an eagle trying to grab it. All I want to do is get out onto the bay and watch the grebes dance. Elise bittern balancing on a reed, a stealthy muskrat returning to his den, a beaver, a fluttering kite. All I want to do is get out to the ocean and watch the whimbrels dig for tiny crabs. And, and hear the oyster catcher's raucous notes and nod to the passing loon, the harbor seal heading for an important date. All I want to do is bear witness to this wild show that plays upon a nearby stage all green and blue, all sun and fog, and know that it will sure reprise after we say good night.